you have a second?
Yep.
Good evening, folks. Sorry for the delay. The hour of 6:30 p.m.
Recording in progress.
The hour of 6:30 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This meeting is being broadcast live on Spectrum Channel 1302. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other Zoning Board of Adjustment members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are made through the chair. Anyone who wishes to address the board is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. Beginning with the board introduction, starting with myself, I'm Josh Gorman.
Joe Hopick.
Jane Taylor.
Richard Clough.
Michael Welsh.
And moving on to the minutes from the February 7th meeting. Did we have any edits? Do we have a motion? Go ahead, Attorney Hopper.
I'll move to approve those minutes from the last session.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Attorney Hoppick. We have a second from Michael Welsh. At this point, I'll call on city staff to see if there's any unfinished business. Oh, we should vote on the minutes too, so let's do that first. Thank you, Attorney Taylor. All of those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you. Unfinished business, John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, we do not have any unfinished business.
Great, thank you. So at this point, I will call on the first applicants for the evening. That's ZBA 22-03, where the petitioner, Norman Miller Jr. and Rebecca Miller, are requesting a variance for property located at 1 Tanner Road, the tax map number being 558-055-000-000. That is in the low-density district. The petitioner requests a variance to install the in-ground pool patio and utility pad 5 feet from the rear and 5 feet from the side of the property per Chapter 100, Article 3.3.2 of the zoning regulations. So at this point, I'll call on city staff for a little bit of background.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this point in time, I would like to inform the board that it would be the recommendation as the zoning administrator, that this applicant does not need to be before the board tonight for this variance. It has come to our attention that and if you look in your packet, you will see this diagram of the proposed pool and the house. Michael Hagan noted that was missed earlier that this property is on a corner lot, and under the zoning code, what you would normally determine this house, the front of the property being, a lot of people would look at this and the way the house is facing, thinking that that's their front, and as such would be where the front setback would be measured from. Actually, as a corner lot, their frontage is actually on Arch Street, not on Tanner Street, because that 90.96 that you see is the shortest distance of the property of the lot. And by zoning definition, that becomes the front of the property, so that's where the front setback would be. So that kind of changes where the measurements we were taking, where we thought in the back where this proposed pool was going to need a 20-foot setback. The pool actually only will need a 10-foot setback, which you can see they're meeting with the 11 feet is the closest point that even just the patio, the wraparound concrete pad is going. That's not even speaking to the pool. And then the pump house that they have, being that it's only a 7x7, the zoning code also allows for one accessory structure to be within the rear or side setback as long as it's under 120 square feet. And that's covered under section, 1.3.3. There's a structural setback exceptions, and again, that's where an accessory structure is allowed to be in those. So at this point in time, I would put it forth to the board that the applicant, we can ask the applicant if they'd be willing to withdraw this without prejudice, just in case anything came back, that they would be able to come back before the board to seek this variance if need be. But it's the opinion of the zoning administrator that they don't need a variance for what they're showing here as a proposal.
Great, thank you, John. So I guess at this point, I'll call the applicants up. You can, sure, Attorney Taylor.
Mr. Rogers, does that mean that, I always get confused, I know, with the corner lots. Does that mean that it has like two sides or two rears, or?
If I may, Mr. Chair, so yeah, it actually, so the Arch Street side, which is kind of the side of the house on the right-hand side of your diagram there, that's where Arch Street is. That would be the front, where the direction that the house is facing, that becomes a side setback. And also because it's a corner lot, that setback gets pushed from a 10-foot to 20 feet. But again, that's not the area that they're proposing to work in at all. And then to the left of the house, as you're looking at the house, becomes the rear of the lot. And then on the other side of this pool they're proposing is the second side setback, where they only need 10 feet. But as proposed, they have a minimum of 11 feet. And that's just, as I said, that's to a 4-foot skirt around the pool. If you actually took the measurement to the pool, they probably have closer to 15 feet there. So they're meeting the setback requirements, and they have that exception for the accessory structure, that since it's such a small structure.
So that's another change we have to absorb from the,
That's actually,
code?
if I may, that's a change, that was not changed.
Okay.
Again, this was more, I'm going to raise my hand and say it's my fault. I did not notice this was a corner lot. Thankfully, Mike picked up on that just before the meeting, that this was a corner lot, and that again changed the direction that we looked at the setbacks from,
Yeah.
which negate the need for this variance tonight.
I can follow up.
What was that Midwestern thing you were
Sometimes.
talking about? Better late than never is what I say.
Good.
All set, Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, if I have anything else, I can ask outside of this application.
Great, thank you. So come on up, folks, just introduce, well, even one of you is fine if that's easiest. Just introduce name and address, and then, I guess-
Norman Miller, 1 Tanner Road.
great. Thanks for coming out tonight. Sorry for the confusion. So is it your preference to withdraw this application without,
Without prejudice, yeah.
Yeah, and then if something does come up, you can simply, reapply or use the same application.
Yes, yep.
Great. Okay. Attorney.
I would move we accept Mr. Miller's request to withdraw 2203 without prejudice to his right to bring it forward if necessary.
Second.
We have a motion from Attorney Taylor to, a motion from Attorney Hobbick with a second from Attorney Taylor to withdraw without prejudice. All of those in favor? It is unanimous. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll move on to our second item for the evening, and that is ZBA 22-04, where the petitioner, G2 Holdings of 250 North Street in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, is requesting a special exception for property located at 0 Route 9 in Keene. That's tax map number 21-007-000-000-000. That is in the rural district. The petitioner requests a special exception to permit a gravel pit use as defined in Chapter 100, Article 8.3.6F, Article 3.1.5, permitted uses in the rural district of zoning regulations. At this point, I'll call on city staff. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the applicant, the application states, this is in the rural district. He's before you tonight seeking a special exception for a gravel pit, which is a requirement. It's an allowed use in that district with a special exception from the board. I just wanted to touch base with you on a couple of things in regards to this one. You will note, and you probably have seen it within your packet, I hope, that the special exceptions of the layout of this is one of the areas that has changed. So there is instead of the previous just four questions that the special exception was before, it's really addressing a lot of the same question, is just broken apart a little bit more. So you will see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 criteria for the special exception now. Again, very covering really pretty much the same ground as it did before, just broken out a little bit differently. The other thing I also want to bring to the board's attention tonight is that the gravel pit, while if this special exception is granted tonight, this project will certainly need to go before the planning board, and the new land development code has one whole section pretty much attributed to earth excavation that the applicant would have to go through at the planning board level, just to make the board aware of some of that criteria that will be looked at on top of the normal site plan criteria that's there. This one specifically talks to setbacks, so there's definitely expanded setbacks that are required both from the right-of-way as well as any abutters. It's pushed out a lot more than just a normal would be required in a rural district for obvious reasons. There's driveway setbacks that are applied to this, again, that are not necessarily under a normal development with that, just considering again the type of traffic that a gravel pit can see. There's additional surface water setbacks over and above what our surface water ordinance requires. There's certainly buffers also required, just like vegetative buffers that need to be maintained. Again, trying to both deal with sound and aesthetics. There's also groundwater quality benchmarks that have to be met. Both they're creating baselines for if there's any domestic wells within certain distances, they have to go in and test these and come up with specific baselines for that well. So to ensure that if my well that was producing 10 gallons a minute today, if they start digging or blasting at any point in time, that my well is still producing 10 gallons a minute down the road. And then there's also stormwater management that would need to be addressed. And again, these are all items that the planning board will be looking at over and above a normal site plan. And then there's also, within that section, there's reclamation processes. So when down the road, if they get to a point of that they've stopped using that area, they can't just be left with dangerous walls for people, and there's some other criteria for safety issues in there that they would, best practice type management steps that are in there. So I just want to make the board aware of that, because I know this is, as far as I'm aware, this is probably the first gravel pit special exception that the ZBA's heard. I think this ordinance was put into place quite a while ago. I think when there was conversation of some gravel pits or quarries being opened up, but as far as I know, this might be the first time that someone's actually applied for the special exception for the gravel pit. I just wanted to make the board aware of that criteria that the board's going to look at, the planning board's going to look at.
Great, thank you. Michael?
Yeah, Mr. Rogers, your list of things that the planning board review would consider and presumably have to approve was long. But one thing I noticed in the narrative was a discussion, and I can't remember if we ever talked about it before, of a wetlands buffer and a desire to reduce the wetlands buffer. Is that something that we would need to consider and approve the technical features of, or is that another planning board or other board?
I would have to take a look again. We have the surface water ordinance that would fall under this board's authority. There's set distance rural. That's going to be, the top of my head, I think it's 75 feet. So if they were going to be encroaching upon that, I think that would be something that they would have to come before this board for. The setback for surface water setbacks within the planning board criteria actually pushes that out, I believe, and again, off the top of my head, without digging in the code a little more, I believe it pushes it out almost to 250 feet. And that would be a planning board decision to be. If I may, Mr. Chair, I think Attorney Taylor has a comment for that.
Yeah, I had the same question. And I guess my concern is that we don't, we can approve a special exception, but we can't approve a variance from the code. And I think I found it in section 24.3.1, subsection D of it. And if that's written in the code, I don't think the planning board has the ability to waive a code provision unless it says it can waive the code provision. So I would be concerned just to know at this stage, is this going to come back to us because they can't meet a setback requirement?
If I may, Mr. Chair, while the earth excavation regulations are not actually in the zoning code. So that criteria, again, like I said, I think if they're meeting the surface water ordinance section that is within the zoning code, that would be something I would have to dig in again. If this is a section that's covered by this sits outside of this requirement sits outside of the zoning code. It's still in the LDC, but it's outside of the zoning code portion of the LDC. So again, and Attorney Taylor might be absolutely correct that there is not the possibility for a waiver from this, and that is something I would have to follow up on. And if there's not an exception for a waiver, then the 250 feet is the 250 feet that would need to be met, would be my initial understanding.
Just for my clarification then, it's really hard to tell with this new land development code where the zoning ordinance ends and other things begin, because if you look at the table of contents, like definitions, which are like in the last section maybe, they apply to the zoning ordinance. So I'm just kind of hard pressed.
I would, if I may, Mr. Chair, I would just.
To figure it
as
out.
Yeah, so I would just point out to the board, I certainly understand Attorney Taylor's frustration with this, and again, I've been able to spend probably more time than most in this book. But if you do look at the bottom of your pages, you will see where it says zoning regulations at the bottom of your page, and it goes right through till Article 18. Article 18 is the last article that's covered as a zoning ordinance.
So,
This whole land development code, again, what was meant to, we took a lot of our city ordinances, some of that throughout the regular city ordinances, and pulled it into this, so it's the development is in one place, so people aren't having to go back and forth between either city ordinance, the zoning ordinance, or the planning board standards, and we've put them all in one place. And I certainly understand probably the table of contents should be a little more clear as to where things end with this. I think, part of it is because the title on the table of contents, right after Article 1, it says zoning regulations, and then starts with Article 2, goes all the way down to Article 18, and then the next one talks about the subdivision regulations, is the more bolder title to the next article within the code. That was kind of the break point there, but obviously I understand and certainly would agree that it's not as clear as it should be. And that is something that we would certainly be looking to, and I think that we can be rectified without having to go through. I think it's just a matter of, creating a better table of contents for the user, to make it more user-friendly.
Well, and again, I don't want to take away from the applicant, but I'm just trying to understand what I'm looking at, because there are many sections, obviously subdivision, site plan, planning board, but there are other things, whether it's application procedures or defined terms, that do apply to the zoning regulation, and I guess that's why I'm really confused, because I'd hate to think that the defined terms don't apply to the zoning ordinance.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I certainly agree. I think that, again, but the thing that I would be looking at this a little bit is I doubt that somebody's, I guess if they wouldn't be here seeking a variance, they would probably be seeking appealing an administrative decision, if I interpreted a definition differently. It wouldn't be a variance that they would be seeking, or the type of thing. So but I certainly understand what you're saying, Attorney Taylor, and that these are some of the corrections that we will be looking to make forward. I just don't know if if it really matters that the definitions are in the zoning code or not, or the application process is in the zoning code or not, because again, I don't think that that's something that somebody's going to be seeking a variance from, or a special exception from.
Could you get clarification for us then, maybe at a subsequent meeting, for such things as, when you have a setback requirement in another section, such as, for example, the excavation, if there is no waiver process, does that setback requirement then come back to what we're looking at?
I will certainly check into that and see what process there is available to, again, I'm certainly, the applicant's going to have that exact same question that you're raising right now, is if there is a need to, and as you stated, if they're stating something there within their application about the need for that, we'll need to see what that process, if there is one for that to occur, if it can even occur. And I will certainly let the board know.
Appreciate that, because it's, in all fairness to the applicant, they ought to know too.
You were absolutely right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. At this point, I'll call on the applicant to come on up, introduce yourself, and begin your presentation. So I will, never mind.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Cavan with TF Moran's office. I'm here representing G2 Holdings LLC, the applicant. We did the survey and the plans that are in front of you. So what you have right now is this G2 had purchased this lot, map 215, lot 7, off of Route 9, almost at the Keene-Sullivan town line is where the property is located. So it's in a very rural section. It's, for the most part, surrounded by undeveloped land within 4/10 of a mile or so of the site that we're
Sir,
we're
could I
looking-
interrupt for one quick second before I forget? Did you give your address?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah,
It can be your business address. it's
yeah.
fine.
TF Moran's at 48 Constitution Avenue in Bedford,
Great.
New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Okay.
Proceed.
So the property is located off of Route 9. And again, it's 84 acres that they purchased. He also owns the property just to the east of this as well. And so there's no one really directly abutting or adjacent to this or very close to the site that they're going to do the gravel pit on. There's currently an existing driveway that comes in off of Route 9 and comes up into the site. One of the previous owners had done some minor work up in the property, so as you come up, you're probably up 15, 20 feet from Route 9. There's a little platform in there. If you look at the general topography, there's a platform in the area that we're proposing the gravel pit, and then it climbs. It's probably a 3-to-1 slope all the way up the top of the hill. There is a kind of a ravine to the west of us on the property that creates a small drainage way or wetland. There is a ditch line or whatnot running along Route 9, so there's a small pocket of wet directly adjacent to Route 9. And then there's kind of a wetland flow line on the west side of this. There's about 2,200 lineal feet of frontage on Route 9. We are proposing to open up initially 5 acres to work within the initial gravel pit. And then once that's complete, we would stabilize that and move to the next 5 acres. And the total proposal was to open up 10 acres. The idea, at least right now, their intention that they would potentially load 30 to 40 trucks a day. They would operate 7 to 5 Monday through Friday. They may have some short hours on a Saturday now and then. Basically, if you're looking at this, the gravel pit, the gravel area that we're proposing is about 1,950 feet to the north to the nearest property line. To the east about, and when I say to the east, I'm saying not counting his property that he owns, it's 1,600 feet. To the west, it's 590 feet, and to the south, where the road is, we come in, we're 176 feet in. Again, the idea would be to utilize the existing driveway, so it's about 12 feet. Comes down relatively steep from there down towards, again, that pocketed wetlands in the front. We would maintain that lower edge of the road and expand it slightly from 12 feet to 18 feet wide so that 2 trucks could get past each other. This would be a gated site, so it would be secured at night. It would be some type of secured container on site, so if they were using fuel or blasting materials, they would all be secured at the end of any type of day. We are proposing to basically capture runoff coming off of this and bring it around to the lower part of the gravel pit where it would be detained and treated and released as it, again, headed towards Route 9 and then across to the river. So we would maintain and treat everything on site. The initial approach is, per Keene's regulations, would be to stay above the seasonal high water table. And any type of blasting that we do, so most gravel pits do some blasting and they crush the rock and then mix it with the overburden. They would be done with smaller blasts and controlled, so from a noise standpoint, and you don't want to just dig down and do a 30-foot blast and have a bunch of loose rock. So it would be smaller blasts so that they can excavate and work their way down into the site. I don't know if you have any general questions, or I could go directly into the standards.
Any questions? Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, the map that we're seeing on the screen, that wasn't in our packet, was it? Do you know?
I'm not sure. We provided it probably last week sometime.
Actually, yes, wait, last
It's the same drawing. We put color to it just so that
Oh.
it.
Because I couldn't figure out the black and white. So
Well,
maybe
that's
that's why I
exactly why
didn't
we did
recognize.
this. So we wanted to illustrate that it is a wooded site. There's significant buffers. The other thing that we're proposing is that there's, on the west side of the property, there's a natural berm between us and that little stream or channel that runs down. So we would maintain that berm or hillside and, work away from that, so that there would be a berm that would help, get rid of sound or reduce sound noise, and also, again, buffer any type of a butter or what have you that we would have. And on the east side, we're proposing, again, he owns the property to the east, but we would be proposing a small berm on that side as well. And then if you look north, again, it's a mountain that basically protects that. We would be leaving the trees in the front. So I think if you go by the site, you don't really see that driveway other than where you come in off of Route 9. So we'd be leaving all that tree cover between us and the roadway just as is, and not impacting that at all. So our idea why we thought this was a good site for this type of use: one, the rural district is the only one where it's permitted by special exception. Secondly, it is out in the middle of a undeveloped piece of property with a nice natural buffer and land configuration around it that would protect it and also provide some buffering to any type of abutters. Should I go ahead on?
Go ahead, Attorney Hoffman.
You're probably going to cover this, so if you are, you can just save it until when you do, but there is no city water or sewer out there, right?
That's correct.
One of the if you're going to cover it, again, just deal with it when you're going to cover it, but I was wondering what facilities you would provide for the employees.
There would be, so there's probably going to be 2 or 3 employees out there. There would be a porta potty
Okay.
type thing. They would have to have eye wash facilities out there and so forth, that type of safety features.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I guess proceed. Thank you.
All right. The nature of the proposed application is consistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning regulations, the LDC, and the city comprehensive master plan. Again, my understanding is the rural zone is the only zone that gravel pit is permitted in by special exception. Again, there's no city water or sewer. Right now, the applicant's thought and intent would be that this would be a good spot for a solar field as a reclamation. That's years down the road. There are substantial setbacks and buffers from any of the adjacent properties. If you're looking at actual buildings, I gave you the dimensions to property lines. From the buildings, we did provide a second exhibit that showed the buildings that we could find, on the plan. So to the north, it's about 0.6 of a mile to the nearest building or house, 2,000 feet to the east, 2,800 feet to the west, which is about 0.5 mile, and then 2,100 feet, 0.4 of a mile across the roadway is the nearest structure. So we're well away from any adjacent structures and provide substantial distances to abutting properties as well. The intent of the master plan is to provide long-term guide and resource for the community in making regulatory and zoning and planning decisions and aligning with the community vision. The proposed use supports the master plan vision, by siting this out in a rural area well away from everything with kind of natural features and environment that actually support it very well as far as buffering and keeping it well from other surrounding development. So we feel that it fits within that master plan and the LDC regulations and meets the spirit and intent of the proposed use will establish and maintain, operate so not to endanger public health, safety, and welfare. Again, as I said, we're addressing and will address it through the process that we go, has been stated. We go through the planning board process. We also have to go through NHDES with a 155E and site-specific or alteration of terrain application, so we have to get those permits as well. The proposed use will not endanger public health, safety, and welfare. We're dealing with stormwater, protecting that natural resource. We're providing vegetated buffers and earth berms that will buffer and screen any adjacent properties, and we will protect the natural features surrounding us with these various design components. We do have a geotechnical engineer working on the geohydrologic study and so forth, and we're putting in the wells and whatnot as required by the town's code. From a traffic standpoint, I understand my office kind of missed that. We did send it out. The traffic was, our findings were basically is very insignificant. If you have 30 to 40 trips and 2 to 3 employees, you're looking at basically 8 new trips during the AM peak hour, and we looked at, over the course of each hour during the day, roughly eight new trips. Right now there is 9,700 trips per day out on Route 9. This would be less than 1% change, and we would anticipate about 15 minutes between any new trip coming or going from the site, so it's a relatively minor impact. There's adequate sight line in both directions, and we have spoken with New Hampshire DOT, just letting them know that we would be filing an application. Even though there is a driveway out there, you have to file for any type of change, so we will be going through New Hampshire DOT. So the last component of that was, traffic impacts or safety. We don't believe traffic will have any negative impact on the public health, safety, and welfare. The proposed use will establish, maintain, and operate so to be harmonious with the surrounding area and will not impede development use on adjacent properties. Again, where we've provided such significant buffers and distances from adjacent properties, we don't believe that we'll have any negative impact on the abutting property. As we go through planning board, as they require, they might, we can implement additional sound implements or features that would break sound down. Again, we feel between the forested buffers and the berms that we're proposing, that will probably be adequate, but there are sound walls that you can put up adjacent to a crusher or what have you to break that sound down. We'll work with the board, the planning board, on whatever, if any additional features are necessary for that. So we believe we've cited this in a proper location, have provided buffers so that we will not have any negative impact on adjacent properties. And the next one will be of character that does not produce noise, odor, glare, and or vibration. Any type of blasting, there are regulations that the blaster has to follow. There's specific areas, distances that they have to go in and check wells. A lot of times you do a pre-blast survey. If there are people relatively close, you would take pictures of their foundations and so forth, because for both persons' protection, you want to know what they look like before you do blasting. So if somebody says, I got a crack in my foundation, you know about what it looked like before. So the blasting company will do the necessary, if pre-blast surveys are necessary, we will apply those, but that's based on distance and what have you. So we don't believe we will have any negative effect. Again, we can control noise, odors. There is no glare associated with this, and vibration. And that'll all be dealt with through the process and with the geotech work that we're proposing to do. The proposed use will not place an
Sir,
excess.
just one quick question from Attorney Hopper.
Can I
for
just
you.
ask you about dust while you're on the subject of noise and odor and whatnot?
Yeah, so basically it's water, you use, you spray it down and maintain so that you control dust, and that's all part of the alteration of terrain requirements and
Okay.
so forth.
Thanks.
So you'd have a water truck on site and make sure you keep dust down to a minimum. Yep. They also would control dust and stuff being trekked off the site. So you put down a stone driveway apron to clear the tires of the trucks coming and going so that you're not trekking dirt out onto the highway and then washing off into the adjacent ditch lines or wetlands or what have you.
John?
If I may, Mr. Chair, and also one of the standards that the planning board will be looking at will be dust control. That's spelled out under Article 24.
Okay.
The proposed use will not place an excessive burden on public improvements, facilities, utilities. So again, the only item we will really have is traffic, and that is a minimal increase in traffic on Route 9. And again, we'll go through New Hampshire DOT for a permit. The proposed use will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined to be significant natural resource, natural, scenic, and historic importance. So again, there's nothing up on this site that is historic, and we have contacted the state historic commission as far as that goes. We've done a wildlife assessment on the property, and where we're leaving the tree coverage across the front of the property, it won't be an eyesore from Route 9 as you're driving, in front of the site. So we believe we will not result in any destruction, loss of natural or scenic historic resources. The proposed use will not create a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in level of traffic congestion, which I think I've already touched base on. So I'll turn it back to the board if you have any questions or if I can provide additional information.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
I just have one
Attorney
quick
Hopper?
one. Can you just elaborate, you made a remark to a 155E application perhaps to the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services?
Correct.
What kind of issues will it address?
It'll be very similar issues that they talk about. Their focus is a lot on dust control, erosion, stormwater treatment, and they will be concerned with the natural resources that are on 3 sides of this site, which would be.
And protecting the water too, right?
What's that?
Protecting the water?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Attorney Taylor?
I have several questions, if I
Sure.
may. One of the maps had in the notes that it was a reference to size and location of building services. So is there going to be a building on this site?
No.
Okay.
We're not proposing any building. Again, we would have kind of a storage unit that we could lock up any type of blasting materials and/or fuels. They would have to all be contained and locked at night.
Okay, thank you. How long does the applicant think that this gravel pit, if it's approved and gets through everything, will operate?
My guess it's a 5 to 10 year period would be my guess. And again, they don't know. It all depends on how business goes and, what's happening in the area as far as development and the need for material.
Okay, well, I don't pretend to understand the soil information that was sent to us, but, I mean, is there a known depth from what the existing surface level is now? How far down it?
Right now, we're showing, we've shown what he would like to do. It's about a 20-foot or so cut, okay? But that may be reduced based on the geotechnical information. So again, we're in the process. We've done borings. We know where ledge is and so forth, but we need to determine exact depth of seasonal high water table. So we're installing wells to determine that. So right now, the plan shows like a 20-foot cut. But that may shrink because we have to maintain separation between seasonal high water table and where we're excavating to. And that's to protect, again, the groundwater and concerns with if anything from blasting material would go across the road to the river.
Is it, sorry, it's safe to say it would not be more than 20 feet based on,
Yeah, it wouldn't be more than what we have shown, that's correct. And the depths vary slightly on the plan.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Go.
So who checks up on you? I mean, after they start, whether blasting or removing material, how do they confirm that they're not going further than they should be?
I don't know that we have a policing procedure set up, but my guess is there would be something through the planning board process that would identify that. And my guess is there would be some type of annual or every other year that we'd have to produce some information showing where we're at.
Okay, because I was wondering how the people on site know that they've gone where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, so we would provide a plan, and then typically, most contractors have GPS equipment that tells them where they are horizontally and vertically, and they would use that equipment. And again, my guess is the planning board may ask for some type of, plan that indicates where we're at, every year or two.
I guess one of my concerns, in all honesty, and maybe, again, we only got the traffic information today, is one of those big trucks, and I'm not quite sure what size trucks you're talking about, because I've seen different size vehicles that carry crushed stone, et cetera. But a truck going in or out every 15 minutes, I mean, it's a pretty busy stretch of highway. And I don't know how often you've traveled that road, but try and get in and out of Otterbrook entrance on a summer day, and it's pretty tough to make a turn coming in towards Keene. So I guess my question is, what direction or where are these stone haulers of whatever size going to be going?
It could be either direction.
Okay.
And I believe we did state that, I think there's so there is a passing zone that begins about 300 feet to the west of our site and extends about 600 feet east of the driveway. So there's a passing zone, passing lane in this area as far as extra room for vehicles to turn and maneuver. So
Well, I can just comment from personal experience that one is not often able to use that passing zone because of the volume of traffic. I may have some other questions, but, you
Great.
know.
Anyone else?
Not at the moment.
Michael? Richard?
I do have one. The 5 to 10 year estimate that you gave, is that for the first 5 acres or for both phases, if you will?
Repeat that, Tart?
Yeah, I think I read in here that you're going to limit the gravel pit to 10 acres total, but the first 5 acres would be the first area that you're going to approach. Then it'll be a second 5 acres that you'd step into when you're
Correct.
sort of done with the first 5. I get, my question is, the 5 or 10 years in response to Attorney Taylor's question that you were, I guess, giving us your best guess on in terms of how long the pit would last, would that cover the entire 10 acres?
You know, again, it's a guess.
Well,
but-
we
but yeah,
understand that.
that's what I was guessing, that it
Okay.
would be in that range.
All right,
And again, if not, my guess is there will be some timeline that we would have to return, you know, to update any approvals that we have, like alteration terrain lasts for 5 years. So, you know, we'll have to go through them. Other items that the contractor has to do, if you have if you have over 100,000 square feet open, you have to file a stormwater management report, and that goes to the state as well as the contractor keeps it, and my guess is the city will want a copy of that. So each rainfall event, or basically once a week, they walk around and verify that erosion control measures are in place and they're functioning properly, and report that to the state, city, and maintain records on site. But we would have to update permits at least after the first 5 years with alteration of terrain, so.
okay, thank you.
John, go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Chair, so as far as, there is a requirement under the standards that the planning board will be reviewing for an annual inspection to be conducted by the community development director or their designee. So there will be inspections to ensure that they're following the approved plan. That'll be done on an annual basis. And also to follow up with Attorney Taylor's question about waivers, there is a section in the Section 20, Article 25, that specifically speaks to the waiver authority of the planning board to grant waivers to Article 24, which covers earth excavation. So there is a waiver process in place for some of these, for the criteria that is within Article 24. It's going to be Article 24 is the, I'm sorry, 25, I apologize. Yes, 25. Sorry. The earth excavation permit starts at 25.19. It speaks to the waiver process under 25. Let me find it again and I'll get back to you.
Great, go ahead.
Yeah, I had remembered what my other question was. You talked about the berm on the east side and the west side of the site, and you acknowledged that it was pretty steep then, I guess it would be on the north side,
Yeah.
going uphill. What are you going to do to prevent that from falling in?
So there's about approximately, and I'm just using round numbers, so there's 10, 12 feet of overburden, and then you're into rock.
Right.
And so you would have a rock face. You'll then taper the overburden or the soil back at 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, and we would have a cutoff ditch at the top of that. So any water runoff coming off the top of that hill would be intercepted and brought around the excavation area. So it's not, washing over the top and potentially washing out the soil slope. Plus, that slope would be stabilized with some type of matting as well as, seeded, periodically as you go through this process.
Yeah, I was just curious because when they were widening that section of Route 9 in Roxbury, they were trying to do it and it kept falling down. So I was
Yeah,
kind of wondering how that
Yes.
was handled so that that kind of situation doesn't arise.
so basically what we're looking at is, again, intercepting runoff from the large hill or mountain, whatever you want to call it, and bringing it around that excavation open area, and then bringing it to our drainage system that we can control and treat that runoff. But also primarily the cutoff swale is to intercept runoff so it isn't washing out slope and whatnot. The drainage system is at again, just above the driveway, but at the base of the gravel pit, so it would intercept anything before it went to that driveway or to Route 9 or the wetlands below us.
Thank you.
One quick question for you, relative to the blasting. I don't know a lot about blasting, but you mentioned that the nature of the blasting would be small in scale. Is that for regulatory reasons or just preference? And if it's preference, how can we be sure that preference wouldn't change? Is this like a business model or?
Well, it'll be part of our plan. And it'll be
Okay.
part of the acceptance or approval through the planning board. So it's for a couple different reasons. One, it controls amount of vibration. The deeper you go, the bigger the blast. So you want smaller blasts. You're also trying to control the noise and what have you. So that's just typically what is proposed in this type of situation.
So it's sort of just an industry standard.
I
in a
don't know
way.
if, I'm sure there are guys that go out and drill and make bigger blasts, but we're proposing smaller blasts so that you're taking off sections of earth, not just going down and,
And at the end of the day, those blast proposals will be part of your plan.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
That's what I was after.
And the idea would be when we approach our design grade, that we would have a fractured or overblasted section, approximately 2 feet, and then we would loam and seed over the top of it to get that stabilized. The reason to overblast is to allow some water to work its way, back into the soil and in through the ledge.
Great, thank you. Attorney Hopwood?
So you made a remark a moment ago about the reclamation plan perhaps involving solar power?
That's one thought, yes, that they've looked at or discussed, that, at the end of this, it would be a nice open area. They could look at some type of solar field.
What's the zoning impact of that kind of thing? Not that we can worry about it 10 years from now, but didn't I see something in Article 8 about that?
I thought solar fields were permitted in the rural district as like an open space.
If I may, Mr. Chair, yes, so solar of, depending on the size, I mean, a small scale solar would be allowed as a permitted use. Any larger, getting into medium or large scale, that would have to go before the
Okay.
planning board for a CUP. And at the same time, if I may, Mr. Chair, the section for the waivers and the exceptions is going to be 25.19.13.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Attorney Taylor, do you have a follow-up after reading that, or? Oh.
No, I'm not going to ask a question now because I haven't read it and it'll take me a little while to read it.
Okay. So I guess at this point, I'll close the public hearing and, seeing no public
Just for the record, there's nobody here to speak in favor or against.
Seeing empty chairs, I'm recognizing that there is no one from the public who wishes to speak. That said, I will now close the public hearing, and if Attorney Taylor needs to address another question with you, I'll reopen it. But
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation, and at this point, the board will begin deliberation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the way we'll go about this is just go down the line one at a time, beginning with A. That the nature of the proposed application is consistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning regulations, the LDC, and the city's comprehensive master plan, and complies with all applicable standards in the LDC for the particular use. Attorney Hoppin.
Well, in terms of spirit and intent, it is specifically permitted by way of a special exception in the zone, so I think that is to be recognized. The other applicable regulations would be significant, RSA 155E being one, the planning board regulations being others, and the Department of Environmental Services being a third. So I believe that it would meet those criteria as well, not just today, but as the project progresses. Plus, the annual inspection that John mentioned is nice to hear. I'm of the view, and the traffic, I did have a chance to read it belatedly, but before I got here, and I agree that it's probably a minimal impact. My experience on the road, post and pre Route 9 renovations a couple of years ago, has not been like Attorney Taylor's, but it still can be well-traveled. But I don't see this as a significant burden on that traffic flow, so I'm not convinced that that's going to be an issue.
Great, thank you. Attorney Taylor.
Just for clarification, I want to make sure I'm following the right criteria. So you're looking at this 25.6.6 criteria, is that what we're following?
It's my understanding that we're following A through G, which is,
Yeah,
Would you say that was again?
25.6.6. It's not in the zoning ordinance.
is that accurate, John? That's what we're following?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Great,
25.6.6, the approval standards.
great, thank you.
I just couldn't figure out what you were reading from if it wasn't that.
Oh, yeah, I was just reading from the applicant's list, but it's
Okay.
indeed the same criterion, I believe. Being our first special exception under the new code, though, I'd like to get it right, so. Is that all correct, John? Great, thank you.
It is, A through G.
Perfect. So we've hit A from Attorney Hobbick. Anyone else have further comment on A? Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, I agree with Attorney Hoppick. This does appear to be consistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning regulations.
Great. I guess we'll move on to B, which states that the proposed use will be established, maintained, and operated so as not to endanger the public health, safety, or welfare. Go ahead, Michael.
I think I've heard testimony and a description of the projected operating procedures, enough to convince me that they've fully considered the risk to the health and public safety and welfare, and that they're going to take care of that.
Great. Yep. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, this is one of the two criteria, actually, that gives me some concern, and that is because we've seen, some statements made, but I'm not sure that we have seen the actual evidence. And I realize their planning board will review, but based on the information we have tonight and my personal information, I don't know that the blasting is going to be appropriate for this location. I don't know all those details on health and safety. Not that I would need to know the final plan, but I think I would need to know more than I've heard tonight. It's great to have assurances, but I don't see the specific evidence.
Okay. Attorney Hopper?
Yeah, I guess my view on that is, the planning board is the 155, or the RSA 155E regulator for this city. And from what I can tell, it has detailed operational standards that that these applicants would have to meet, and they're subject to the annual inspection, as John mentioned. I think that whatever regulation with respect to blasting, dust, noise, he said no odor, so forget about that, would be addressed as they went along in terms of not just the operational plans when they're proposed and approved, but as it's operating itself by virtue of those inspections. So, and then of course once the operation is over, there's the significant reclamation issues that they would have to propose, have approved in advance of the expiration of the permit under 155E. So I think the criterion is satisfied based on all the steps that are in place to ensure public health, safety, and welfare. And the information that we have tonight, I think, is probably the best available in terms of what they know about what the project will entail. I mean, I agree with you, Jane. That test pit information was Greek to me. I didn't know what, it didn't mean a thing in terms of the application, but, that's what they found and that's what they gave us, so. But in terms of that issue of health and safety, I think the provisions in place to ensure that ongoing, or going forward rather, satisfy me to a great degree that criterion will be satisfied and is satisfied today.
I think, sort of echo Attorney Hoppick, with the amount of regulatory restrictions through city planning, New Hampshire DES, I do agree that some of the information we're being given is speculative, as Attorney Taylor alluded to. That can be nice to hear, but there are no guarantees. But I do feel like there's enough regulation in place where it does kind of become a guarantee at some point. And that's probably the point where it goes through planning. And I also do think my concerns about blasting and noise and all of those things, they are dimmed by the location because there's just so much area around this proposed use is not really, there's not a lot of human activity near it. I don't think the noise is going to be disruptive to people because they're not going to be there. For the most part, there aren't houses or a lot of anything except forest around it, so that certainly helps, in my view. Anyone else? Moving on to C, the proposed use will be established, maintained, and operated so as to be harmonious with the surrounding area and will not impede the development, use, and enjoyment of the adjacent property. Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
I think the nearest, it's not specifically adjacent, but the Otterbrook Center, I'm not quite sure how occupied that is or how often or what its operations are currently, but I think they are probably the closest area that would have any impact. And I think that unless they're doing blasting every half hour, it's not going to be a huge impact on the adjacent area.
Anyone else?
I would have to agree with that, given the distances in the area that you mentioned.
See. Great. Moving on to D, that the proposed use will be of a character that does not produce noise, odors, glare, and/or vibration that adversely affects the surrounding area. I do feel like some of these are tied together and redundant, but go ahead, Michael.
They seem that way to me, too. And I think the only thing I would add is we may hear some blasting if you're down at the Otterbrook Beach, but if you're down there, you often hear guns firing at the adjacent rifle range too, and they'll be competing with percussive sounds that won't necessarily be inconsistent with what you would otherwise hear.
Right. Throw in a little bit of thunder, no one will notice the difference. Attorney, any topic? Attorney Taylor, nothing? All right. Moving on to E, that the proposed use will not place an excessive burden on public improvements, facilities, services, or utilities.
Well, I guess the first observation is there are very few public utilities out there, or services for that matter. There is the road, and we talked about that, and I don't think there's going to be a significant impact on that. So I think that criterion will be met as well.
Great. Moving on to F, that the proposed use will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined to be of significant natural, scenic, or historic importance. Attorney Taylor?
Well, I think we heard testimony that they've already had, historic review and environmental studies of the area, so from what I've heard, they've met that criteria.
Great. Moving on to G, the final,
Seems like we've addressed that too, but
yeah, that's that the proposed use will not create a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity of the use. I do believe we covered that in A, but if anyone else wants to add to it, go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, this is the other one that creates a problem for me. There's indication that it won't necessarily be a substantial increase in level of traffic congestion. Well, won't be a substantial increase in the level of traffic. I don't know about the safety hazard or the congestion. Again, I'm really concerned about the number of trucks turning in and out of that road where speed limit may be posted for 55, but I haven't seen too many people who go 55 in that stretch. It's usually 65 or better. So I have a real concern about that.
Anyone else? Attorney Hoppick.
yeah, the trip generation table on the second page of the memorandum, traffic memorandum, seems to indicate that there will be 3 employees coming in the morning and leaving after 4 p.m., and there'll be a host of traffic coming in and out hour by hour, roughly 4 vehicles an hour, and then 2 at the end of the day. And during the course of the day, let's say, other than peak hours, rush hour in the morning, rush hour in the evening, people leaving Keene, people coming into Keene, which can be significant going that way. Most of this traffic is going to be during the day when those people aren't even going to be using the road. And again, that's usually after 5 p.m., after these employees have already left. So the level of congestion to me is, and I think the report uses the word nominal or insignificant, I can't remember which one it was, but negligible. And I think that's true, based on this study. So I regard it as a low impact and not a source of any traffic congestion. So that's really all I'd say about that.
I would be
Sure.
inclined to agree. Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, we can agree to disagree, but I'm not necessarily, my concern is not necessarily congestion, it's a safety hazard issue for me.
Great. So from my point of view on that, I feel like four vehicles an hour on a road that, I don't know what the traffic count is per diem, but it's certainly high. So when I look at the percentage increase that may be being caused, I lean more towards what Attorney Hoppick is saying. I do understand Attorney Taylor's safety concerns, but I think the passing lane certainly helps. And, while traffic may move at 65, I don't think triaxles do when they're entering and exiting a pit. So I think that'll force the speed of the average driver to just adapt to what's going on, and I think it'll all be adequate. Anyone else? So I get this, guess at this point, I'll ask the board if we have a motion. Attorney Hopper?
I'm happy to make one, but I guess I have a question about conditions. Given the regulatory oversight this project will experience after tonight, it's going to go to whatever phases they go through, Planning Board, DES, and what have you. Is it necessary to make the special exception contingent, which is a use change, contingent on approval of all applicable regulatory authorities? Or is that just a given?
Certainly, it would be up to the board, but at the very start of Article 24, which is dealing with the excavation permit, it basically is stating that no one shall operate without obtaining that permit from the planning board. So I think that I don't see the need to condition that, because again, with all the criteria that the planning board is going to be reviewing, many of the questions that were rose tonight, the planning board will be addressing, and that would be conditional of their permit, to obtain that permit. So, but again, it certainly would be up to the board to decide if they wanted to condition it.
And that's what 155E2 requires as well, or states, so.
Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I think actually it probably wouldn't hurt, let's put it that way, because you've got, just 155E, you've got the planning board, you've got the New Hampshire DOT, you may have the environmental side too, so we probably don't even know all the permits that are involved in this. So I would say that that's probably a really good idea to condition it upon approval of all applicable permitting.
I don't think it hurts either, so. So what I would do then is propose to move that we approve ZBA 22-04, subject to the approval of all applicable regulatory authorities, to include but not limited to the Planning Board, the Department of Environmental Services, and the rest that I can't recall right now, so.
Great. Do we have a second? Okay, so we have a motion, sorry, I'm not near the microphone. We have a motion from Attorney Hoppick to approve the application, inclusive of all regulatory standards from other various boards, state bodies. However, Attorney Hoppick worded it. We have a second from Michael Welsh. So with that said, we will move through and vote on each criteria, beginning with criteria A. That is that the nature of the proposed application is consistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning regulations of the LDC and the city's comprehensive master plan, and complies with all applicable standards in the LDC for the particular use. All of those that are in favor, it is unanimous. Moving on to letter B, the proposed use will be established, maintained, and operated so as not to endanger the public health, safety, or welfare. All of those in favor? It is 4. All of those opposed? It is 1. 4 to 1. Moving on to C, that is that the proposal use will be established, maintained, and operated so as to be harmonious with the surrounding area, will not impede the development, use, and enjoyment of the adjacent property. All of those in favor? That is unanimous. And moving on to D, the proposed use will be of a character that does not produce noise, odors, glare, and/or vibration that adversely affects the surrounding area. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Moving on to E, that the proposed use not place an excessive burden on the public improvements, facilities, service, or utilities. All in favor? That is again unanimous. F, the proposed use will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined to be significant, natural, scenic, or historic importance. All in favor? Again, it's unanimous. And moving on to the final one, G, the proposed use will not create a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity of the use. All in favor? It is 4. All opposed? It is 1. 4-1 on G. And finally, for, yes, ZBA 22-04, the petitioner, G2 Holdings, 250 North Street, Jefferson, New Hampshire, requests a special exception, property located at 0 Route 9. And then all of those in favor? It is 4, all opposed to 1. Thank you for this
Thank you.
evening, and good luck. At this point, we'll move on to new business.
So at this point in time, Mr. Chair, we don't necessarily have new business. I just wanted to put it forth, and I'll actually let Corinne and maybe Attorney Taylor speak to it. I know Corinne had held a little bit of a training over the LDC. Certainly would put that out to any of the members at any point in time, that if, again, with this new code, if anybody, wants to come in, sit down, Corinne, myself, Michael, can certainly go through it. And then certainly I appreciate the comments that are coming forth, because as I stated, this is a totally new format that we're all trying to learn, and we're still coming across things on a daily basis that just even sometimes finding some of the things in the code can be difficult. But I think there's some pretty easy solutions for some of those that we've come across so far, but would certainly encourage anybody that wanted to reach out, and we can do a kind of a one-on-one or one-on-two type training.
Great.
if the
I have
board
one
desires.
comment about that. So, in looking at the, tonight's case is a perfect example, the requirements or the response to approval standards that the G2 Holdings people submitted. These are the new special exception criteria. I could not find those criteria anywhere in this thing. Nowhere. I knew they were in there, but I didn't know they were in 25 whatever, but 2566, couldn't find them. And my comment to Corinne today was, when I went to get my little bit of training, was the code should maybe have an index. And then she explained about elaborating on the table of contents, which may not hurt either, but an index would be more of a time-consuming task, because there's a lot of stuff to index. But
If I may, Mr. Chair, I certainly appreciate that, again, because ultimately what we're looking for is the most user-friendly document that we can. And so any of those type of comments or
or you can just give us a word searchable PDF on a laptop. That'll do it.
yeah, I'm not sure my budget's going to allow
I
for
didn't
that.
think so.
But
Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, for anybody who hasn't done it, I found it very helpful to sit with Corinne and go through the, there were a few things I couldn't find, and it really helped clarify it. But I do have concerns, as I pointed out earlier this evening, if you're going to call a certain section the zoning ordinance, then you shouldn't have definitions that apply to it considered not in the zoning ordinance, and you shouldn't have, what is this? Application procedures where you find like the criteria for variance, special exception, all those things that apply to the zoning. They should be part of the zoning ordinance. So, I understand what they were trying to do much better now with this document, but it's kind of inconsistent to say, oh, only the first 18 sections are, articles or the zoning ordinance, when you've got stuff in the rest of it that applies to the zoning ordinance. So,
if I may, Mr. Chair, again, and I certainly understand the way, what you're stating, but we have to also look at this as an overall document, as a land development document, not just a zoning document. And so if I need to look for something, again, if I have to, as with most applications before you, are going to go in front of other boards as well. This one obviously is going to go in front of the planning board, and then it's going to actually go in front of, possibly for Michael for building permits for, electrical, whatever else they might need on the site. So again, that was the intent of this document, was to try and, so if I'm, okay, well, how do I apply for something that I wouldn't have to go in 3 different spots within this document to find an application for the zoning board and then an application for the planning board. It was kind of try and put it in all one area. But I certainly understand Attorney Taylor's frustration with that it's, if we're talking about zoning and this is dealing with zoning, that it should be in that area. And we did pull in under definitions for all of the uses are covered in the zoning code. And again, some of these things are areas that, people are going to be looking for, again, whether it's a variance or a special exception, that's all within the zoning code. Somebody's not going to necessarily seek a variance from an application process or a definition. But the use definitions absolutely, since that is absolutely part of the zoning code, are in that zoning code for that reason.
So I sort of see the logic behind having a definition table that is applicable to everything, and then having a use specific to zoning, use definition. So I guess my question is, I see the logic behind that, so that if I'm doing something with planning, I can know where to go for the definitions, or zone, or, historic, whatever. So I don't really take exception to those definitions being outside of the zoning body, nor do I take exception to the applications being outside of it, because if I was applying for something, I would have the preference to be able to find all of my applications in one location, I think, which is how the new document is set up. So I think that these things have merit, but I guess my question is for Attorney Taylor. Is there a specific reason that you don't like it that way? Is it just because it's different, or is it because you see, possible legal issues behind it with not having those zoning pieces inclusive in the zoning section?
Well, I think my issue in raising it is just that it's inconsistent to say the entire, zoning ordinance is only the first 18 articles of the document. And yet, it's got to be read together with the rest of the document. So I guess it's more of a word of caution. I don't know if it's going to create any legal issues or not, but I do think it's just a word of caution that we shouldn't just have total blinders on and say that the zoning ordinance is the first 18 articles and then 19 through 28 aren't relevant, because I think we're going to find that they are, as we found tonight. We had to look at the excavation section to really know what was going on. And obviously the criteria for the special exception was in, and now I've forgotten what number it is, in 25. So, we've got to look at it as a whole document and not just as narrowly as the zoning ordinance. I think that's what I'm really getting at.
Great, thank you.
And the other side of that coin is the more familiar we get with it, the easier it's going to be.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the learning curve is painful sometimes.
Any other commentary on that? Any other new business, John? Corinne?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Great. Michael? Nothing? All right.
He's pleading the fifth over there.
Smart guy. So, I guess to wrap, we will close this meeting. Have a good evening.
The time will change the next time we meet.
Yes.